I remember it very well. Thomas informed us about something that very few people knew about the specific orders that the Wagner Group would give to their fighters. Specific orders to kill everybody in specific occasions. And this can be researched, this can be traced down to what actually happened there. There's plenty of videos of Wagner fighters admitting that they were told, leave no one alive. These specific orders, women, children, elderly, doesn't matter. Everybody would be killed. And that is something that people should consider when speaking for negotiations with Russia. Because one day you're negotiating with Russia, and the next day you find yourself surrounded by Wagner troops waiting to rape the women and to exterminate every single person who's in there. Criminals pulled straight from jail and sent to kill you. That is what the Wagner Group is. And although Prigozhin and Utkin, the two big dogs in Wagner, have been killed, well, honestly, because Prigozhin was running his mouth against Putin at that point. He was speaking too much truth against Putin. He was revealing too much. Has nothing to do with all the war crimes that Prigozhin has committed. No, Putin respected and praised Prigozhin for those war crimes. Putin killed him for something else. He killed him because he was telling too much truth. That is what happened, my friends. And for all of these individuals who claim that they want to negotiate with Russia, think about that. Think about who Russia employs in their military. Think about how Russia wages their wars. Think about how Russia does diplomacy. On one day, they sign a treaty with you. A few hours later, they break that treaty if they feel like they can get away with it. Just like they did in the Second Minsk Agreement that lasted for a few hours. That's right. In the Battle of Debaltseve, the Russians had the advantage. And when the Minsk Agreement, the Second Minsk Agreement was signed, they stopped attacking the Ukrainians for a little bit. When the Ukrainians had lowered their guard and expected the Russians to honor the agreement, to not attack them anymore, they came right back. And they attacked with renewed force. And that is how they won the Battle of Debaltseve. But of course, the shills and Russophiles claim that it was the Ukrainians that broke the agreement somehow. Although the Russians have started this war, although the Russians had started attacking in the Battle of Debaltseve, they were the ones on the attack, on the offensive. So the question rises, who has betrayed the agreement? And the answer is obvious, the Russian terrorist regime. But my friends, we come back to the topic of who is it that should support Ukraine. Is it the Ukrainians and only the Ukrainians? No. It is everyone. Thank you very much. It is everyone who wants to live a better life. Everyone who wants to be free. Everyone who wants to have a better future for humanity. And it is up to everyone to join us and to make their voice be heard. And now, my friends, I'll give voice to one of our friends here to show his own opinion. Sorry. Yanis. Yes.
Ukrainian citizens, ladies and gentlemen, before I get started, I want to say a word of thanks to the Ukrainian police, ambulancemen, firemen, nurses and doctors who continue their work to look after the sick, the elderly, the vulnerable, despite being bombed, their hospitals, and keep bombing the shelling in the hospitals that we have seen. Words cannot describe the pain of those nurses and treating the elderly people and all the sick people in those hospitals. But you, the Ukrainian citizens, I want to thank you. You have shown and inspired millions and millions of people all around the world and across this country of what you are capable of doing. When Russian soldiers invaded your countries, you didn't sit back like politicians said that the Ukrainians wouldn't fight, they would sit and they wouldn't do anything. That you stood your ground, you stood for your country, and you showed the world that you can fight back, and you have done so. I want to also say my deepest gratitude to the Ukrainian soldiers who are currently fighting on the front line. And I send my deepest sympathies to those families who are constantly worried about their loved ones in the war. I will never forget when the Russians invaded, seeing all those young soldiers saying goodbye to their children, to their wives, their girlfriends, and their families, knowing that they would be going to fight this war and not knowing if they would come back or not. But my badge here, that all our badges say, souls and bodies will lie all for freedom. And many have, I'm afraid. So many Ukrainian soldiers have died. And I would like to pay tribute to all of those that have. But I say this, yes, they have died, but we must never forget why. For our freedom, Ukraine's freedom, and the freedom of all democracies all across the world. Let's not forget that. And as we know, we honor our war dead every year at the cenotaph here. And I would say that we should honor the Ukrainian soldiers. Once this war comes to an end, we should have our own memorial here on the streets of London, so that Ukrainians that live in London can pay tribute to their own soldiers. But when Russian terrorists tried to take your city, and the assassination attempts on your own government, told that the government of Kyiv would fail, but it didn't. Your democracy stood strong, and that all attempts to destroy Ukraine's democracy by terrorism will fail. And I remember, whereas Winston Churchill would say, never surrender. Now I fear that there are politicians in this country, well, some in this country, but mostly some of the global leaders, like Viktor Orban, Donald Trump, who says they will end this war in a day. Well, present your solutions, because I fear that there will be pressures on the Ukrainian government to accept treaties and similar to the Minsk agreement that was signed. I say do not be pressurized, do not give in and be forced to sign any more treaties with a tyrant like Putin that he is. And I would say to all of you, you all have MPs in your local areas. Write to your MPs, tell them what you think of this war. Make sure you get your voices heard to them, because they are your representatives and we must make them heard. I'm a member of the Conservative Party and I'm proud that the Conservative Party stood with Ukraine. When Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, we were the first to send weapons to Ukraine, when it was in fact the Germans that said, oh no, we're going to just send Ukraine 5,000 helmets. Okay, I mean, helmets were important, they are. But for a big country like Germany, just to announce 5,000 helmets was an absolute joke. For Europe's largest economy, just to offer you helmets. But thankfully, the Germans have now become your second largest aid, which is very good to how they were at the beginning of the war. But now, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you a memory of what my grandmother, she told me. My granny, she told me before she died, that in this street, years ago, we were celebrating VE Day here on the streets of London. There was Union people waving Union Jack flags, singing our national anthem. I hope that in a few years, well, hopefully it'll be sooner than that, but we never know when this war will end, that we will be on the streets, not in London, but in Kiev, and we will raise the Ukrainian flags, we will sing the anthem, and we will show Putin that Ukraine has succeeded. And now I will come to an end, but we must never surrender, as Winston Churchill said. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Слава Україні!
Слава нації! Україна! Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Thank you very much, my friend. Thank you, Yanis. That was a very impassioned speech. I like it. You know, I really liked it. It's great when people come here, you know, and show to the world their own way of spreading our message. You see, my friends, our opposition, the ones who support the Russian terrorist regime, are always ultra emotional. They don't have any points to give. And emotions are something human, but we must not allow emotions to dilute our reasoning. And with our reasoning and our emotions, we can see very clearly right now that Russia is a terrorist state and that it will not stop at Ukraine. In fact, there's already been threats to Moldova because of the supposed blockade that we're doing to Transnistria. So Transnistria was not recognized by anybody. It is officially part of Moldova. And yet the Russian terrorist regime feels enabled to claim that it has rights for Transnistria. And the poor Russian people in Transnistria are getting oppressed. Which poor Russian people? The Russian soldiers who were left there despite not having any right to be there in the first place. Are those the poor Russians who are being oppressed? Absolutely ridiculous, my friends. And I too will quote Churchill, because Churchill has a lot of very good quotes for this specific situation, for all situations that are similar to this one. You can't negotiate with a tiger when your head is in its mouth. Churchill knew it was impossible to negotiate with Hitler. And everybody should have known that. But not everybody did. Now, in hindsight, we think that World War II was the war against Germany. But back in those days, a lot of countries were pursuing this policy of appeasement. The UK was the only country in Europe who always stood against Nazi Germany. We forget sometimes, but for about 5 months, the UK was the only country in direct confrontation with Nazi Germany. The only one. Now, did the UK have a chance of winning that war alone? A low chance, my friends. But the UK endured. The UK fought back. The UK did better than what the Nazis expected them to do. And in the end, they won. They never surrendered. Because if you surrender to a hungry tiger, it doesn't mean that you will be spared. It just means that you will be eaten without even putting up a fight. That's exactly what it means to give concessions to Russia, to surrender to Russia. Today, my friends, as usual, I will go to Speaker's Corner with some of the people who usually go with us there. And the people who are in Speaker's Corner sometimes speak against our cause. And it's good to find opposition. It's good to engage with that opposition head on. One of the things that they usually say is as follows. They ask us, why is it that Ukraine didn't just surrender? Why is it that Ukraine didn't just allow the Russians to take over? I mean, there would be less deaths, right? There would be less casualties, less blood. Don't you want peace? But my friends, in situations like these, people forget that sometimes the alternative to war is not peace. Sometimes the alternative to war is extermination. And that's exactly what the Ukrainians are facing right now. That is what the Ukrainians faced before World War II began, in the days of the Holodomor. That is what the Ukrainians fought against back then. That is why Holodomor mostly was committed in eastern Ukraine, not in western Ukraine, where the heroes of the UPA fought back against them and beat back the Soviet Union, at least for a while. They did not allow the Soviets to exterminate the population of western Ukraine. Right now,